So we are here to see if we can become a little bit more satisfied, find a little bit more ease or enjoyment or pleasure or clarity through this time together. And even if you shared already verbally, if you're willing to put your intention in the chat, that is always beautiful to be able to share it, voice it, name it. So if there's something specific that brings you here, and put it in the chat. I desire, I need, I want. So making it a heartfelt, sincere first person statement, plunk it into the chat as your intention. And let that guide you throughout class. So as you're making choices, especially if this might be one of your first classes with me, or you haven't practiced in a little while, or if you're under the weather, in my world and in my classes, you always get to follow your body's lead. You know yourself better than I do. And yet, in these relationships and classes and practices, we get to know each other and we can fine tune then the practices and how they're suggested. So, for tonight, take good care, do what you need to do. Okay. This workshop is an introduction to some key ideas and principles that we'll be exploring later this year in November in person for the first ever Midwest Satisfy Embodiment Retreat. I'm calling it the second annual-ish Satisfy Retreat because this project or body of work was born and first released into the world with a group of women in Connecticut last February. And so we're taking that and expanding it into a 4-day all-inclusive retreat this November in the Midwest. So definitely take a peek at that after class tonight. For our time together, we have 3 simple agreements. There's not going to be as much of a circle sharing time. But I still want to do our 3 agreements that we use in pretty much every class and program that I teach. The first one is, may we be moved. May I be moved. Meaning there's something here for you. Can you trust that there's something that can spark, whether it's insight or a new experience in yourself, whether it's energetic, spiritual, physical, emotional, all of the above? You're welcome here. You belong here. And I know there's something possible for you. May we be moved. Second agreement is to treat yourself with self-compassion and kindness. So if there's something that feels out of reach for you, or something that feels like, oh, I want to do it this way instead, or I'm not sure how open to pleasure I am at this moment in time or this point in my life, really just trust all the shame, all the baggage, all the judgment. See if you can drop that, at least for tonight, and invite in more kindness, more positive self-regard, that like, I'm okay as I am and somehow I'll find my way. Okay. So kindness. The third agreement is that what we share is sacred and confidential. So if there is something shared in the chat or later off the record in our circle, it's held in privacy and confidentiality. So yes, yes, yes. With those 3 agreements, we launch forward. So take a moment and just land, notice where your body is in this moment. Maybe you're standing and you feel your feet spread into the floor. If you're seated, maybe you notice, oh, could I actually be supported a little bit more or a little bit better? And these are just baseline clues of information about your current state, current posture, current way of being. None of it needs fixing or changing. Again, no need to self-criticize. We're just starting to locate, like, okay, if I'm multitasking, if I'm doing something else while I listen in, and I do that thing and maybe slow it down 30%, becoming a little bit more present. if you do have the luxury of pausing, what I call unitasking, if you do have the capacity right now to shut down browsers, turn off TVs, dim the lights, close the door, so that you can really be focused and have your own experience during our practice, I invite you to deliberately simplify. Bring down the distractions so that you can be as potent and present as you can be. Okay. So, anytime I teach a class, and I'll just share maybe a few more minutes and then we'll get going for movement and practices. Anytime I share a class, there is usually what I plan to teach and then what emerges in real time. And so there's a few definitions of the word satisfy that I've been working with the last couple of years in my own embodiment and practice, which then led to the first Satisfy retreat out east last year and is deepening now as I'm preparing for this retreat in November of 2025. So those three definitions, the first one is to fulfill a need or request, right? It's the process of giving what's needed. We are satisfying a need. And I hope that, again, whatever it is you're looking for or that you feel you need, you get at least a taste of it tonight by being together, by slowing down, simplifying, getting more present, and then the specific practices that we'll get into. Secondly, satisfying means often that we slow down enough to actually have an experience. For a long time, I worked with the word savor, almost called this retreat savor. And so there is that quality of bringing our full attention to the one thing, slowing down, really turning it over, fully experiencing it as if to be devoted, to fully savor it and take it in. I invite you to do that in your own way tonight. The third one, more kind of root word literal definition of satisfy, is to make enough. Like, I don't know how many of us, probably all of us, can raise our hand in terms of feeling like either we are not enough for life and the tasks at hand, or that somehow our body isn't enough when it comes to sensuality or pleasure or body confidence. And so these ideas, these layers of conditioning that we typically all carry, especially as females, as women, that somehow we're not enough as we are. We're not thin enough, we're not pretty enough, we're not healthy enough, whatever it is. Ugh. Like literally the definition of satisfy, when we slow down to savor and have an enriched experience of ourselves, it makes that present moment, makes it enough, helps us remember this moment is enough. What I already have is enough. Who I am in my body right now, as my body is right now, somehow is still enough to open me to something good. Even amidst the dissatisfaction, the illnesses, the stressors, you name it. Right? So those three definitions are what I prepared for tonight. And I really found myself earlier this evening when I took in a little bit of news again, was just struck by the chaos and the accelerated kind of pace and like assault on our senses of like everything is urgent, everything is an emergency, and there's so much called up in us, whether it's emotional response and reactivity, as well as actual engagement, right? Like, what are we going to do about the things we see happening in our lives, other people's lives, politically, etc., right? So, like, big scale, I kind of zoomed out for a moment and said, oh my God, how is it possible to feel satisfied right now, right? Like, just sort of struck by the irony or the paradox of that. And so if you feel that you belong here, if you are deeply noticing your own dissatisfaction, your own dissent, and that like uncomfortable sort of disgust and resentment and like, what am I going to do with that? How do I change that? That's not right. That's not okay. How do we use that dissatisfaction, alchemize it in a way that we can actually move forward productively, where we actually can remember or get resourced in ourselves and our bodies so that we know the thing that is ours to do. So tonight we're going to zoom back in on ourselves, deliberately simplifying, really just seeing, can I have an experience here that is at least comforting and neutralizing, maybe positive and pleasant. But this work for me, just know that, like, hot second, I'll get on my soapbox, right? That this work expands into how we live our lives and express our values, right? It's that community care, mutual win win that I'm interested in, and our personal embodiment can serve that. For tonight, it's just all for you. Okay. For tonight, it's all for you. So if you have any thoughts that you want to jot down, take a moment and write. If you're feeling a little of that, just the mention of like, I looked at the news before class, like maybe I shouldn't have, but I did, right? And so, what's present in me? How can I work with that? How can I let that show me right here, I'm enough in this moment? And if I can find some ground, find some clarity again, that's not only going to serve me, but everyone around me. So, your pleasure is welcome. Your dissent is welcome. The awkwardness that might come up, the frustrations that we might feel when we start to try to get present, all of that is welcome because it's all your lived experience in real time. Kindness, self compassion, rinse, repeat. Okay.